All right, let's jump right in. We tend to think of scientific journals as these fortresses of fact, right? They're protected by this super rigorous process called peer review. But what if a Trojan horse could sneak past the guards? What if an argument that looks and sounds and just feels like science isn't science at all?
It's a pretty wild question, right? And according to a new research paper we're looking at today, the answer is a resounding yes. The paper suggests this isn't just a hypothetical. It's happening right now. And it's happening in some of the most complex, cutting-edge fields out there, which really challenges the whole system we count on to separate fact from fiction. So let's talk about peer review for a second. It's supposed to be the gold standard. It's the quality control system, where experts in a field tear a new paper apart, looking for any errors, weak arguments, or shoddy methods before it ever sees the light of day. It's basically designed to be the guardian of objectivity in science.
But what happens when the problem isn't just a simple mistake? What if it's a deeply held ideology that's put on a lab coat and is pretending to be science? Well, that's exactly the challenge a new linguistic analysis decided to tackle.
And this isn't a totally new idea. To really get what's going on with this modern-day Trojan horse, we've got to take a quick look back at a long and, let's be honest, often pretty heated history of debate between science and some religious viewpoints.
This whole debate over evolution in the US has been going on for, over 150 years, from Darwin's game-changing book all the way to famous courtroom battles. But a really key moment happened back in 2005 with the Kitzmiller versus Dover trial. In that case, a federal court made a huge ruling. They said intelligent design was a religious belief, not a scientific theory. And in that ruling, they actually gave a name to a very specific strategy they saw being used.
They called it negative science. And here's the key takeaway. It's a tactic that's all about poking holes in an existing theory, just creating doubt, without ever offering a real, testable, scientific alternative to take its place. So it attacks, but it doesn't build anything new. Now, you're going to want to remember that term, negative science, because the paper we're looking at argues it's back, but with a very 21st century makeover.
So, okay, how does this old tactic connect to what's happening today? Well, the paper we're digging into for this explainer decided to put a very specific series of modern scientific articles right under the microscope. And on the surface, these papers look totally legit. They were published in peer-reviewed journals, they were written by scientists with all the right credentials, and they used all this super complex language from biomathematics and AI to challenge some of the core ideas of evolution. They basically made it past the gatekeepers. But some researchers had a hunch that there was something else going on, just beneath the surface of all that technical jargon. So they brought out the big guns, AI-assisted linguistic analysis. They used it to scan these papers for hidden patterns, looking for clues that even a human reviewer might have totally missed.
And what they found, it was pretty fascinating. See, they weren't just hunting for simple factual errors. They were looking for a specific kind of rhetoric, a style of argument that felt a lot more like someone was trying to persuade you of something, rather than just explaining the science.
All right, so this here is basically the detective's case file. The source paper flags 5 key patterns that just kept popping up again and again. We're going to zoom in on a couple of the big ones, like the use of moralizing language, and this really interesting way they used AI, not as a tool, but as a judge. First up, let's talk about the language. Instead of using neutral, objective scientific words, the source paper found that the authors were constantly using moralizing, value-packed language. They'd call the scientific consensus on evolution a dogma or a pernicious consensus. And when you do that, you're framing the debate not as a scientific disagreement, but as some kind of moral crusade. And this next part is a brilliant example of a key rhetorical strategy they found. The paper argues the authors intentionally mix up 2 totally different scientific questions: evolution, which is all about how life diversifies after it starts, and abiogenesis, the study of how life might have begun in the first place. So by hammering on the real, genuine scientific questions about how life started, they create this illusion of doubt about how it evolved. It's a classic straw man argument, textbook stuff.
Okay, then you've got the role of artificial intelligence. The papers make this big claim that AI is going to be the ultimate judge of Darwin's theory. But how exactly are they using it? What are they actually doing with it?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The source paper found a huge difference in how AI was being talked about. It wasn't being used as a tool, to analyze data or run models. Instead, it was being used as a rhetorical device, sort of an appeal to this future all-knowing tech god that will one day swoop in and prove evolution wrong. It's like they're borrowing the authority of AI without actually doing any of the hard scientific work. So after putting all these rhetorical clues together, you've got the moralizing tone, the straw man arguments, this weird appeal to AI. The source paper arrived at a pretty stark conclusion.
Their conclusion was that these peer-reviewed papers weren't really making scientific arguments at all. Instead, they were functioning as a modern form of something called Christian apologetics.
So what does that even mean in this context? Well, it's the practice of using the language and the format of science, but not to test a hypothesis. Instead, it's used to strategically defend a belief you already hold, a theological one. It is, quite literally, science in disguise.
And the analysis didn't stop there. It dug up one more crucial piece of the puzzle. One of the authors is a public signer of a petition from the Discovery Institute, which, if you don't know, is a leading intelligent design organization. That petition expresses major skepticism about Darwinism. The source paper argues that this is a huge ideological alignment that was never declared as a conflict of interest. They even give it a name, an epistemic conflict of interest, meaning a deeply held belief system that could be shaping the research from the get-go.
So you might be thinking, why does one series of papers really matter in the grand scheme of things? Well, according to the source paper, it matters because this specific case shines a huge spotlight on some systemic vulnerabilities in the very process we trust to protect science.
Think of this case study as a stress test for the whole peer review system, and it's revealing some potential cracks. It shows how ideological arguments can perfectly mimic the form of science. It shows how overworked reviewers who are already swamped might miss these subtle rhetorical tricks, and it shows how in super complex fields, theological ideas can be disguised as technical jargon. It basically exposes how the system itself can be gamed.
So what do we do about it? What's the solution here? Well, the source paper proposes a clear and, yeah, probably a little controversial step forward. Just like scientists have to disclose any financial conflicts of interest, maybe they should also have to disclose deeply held ideological commitments that could shape their research. The goal here isn't to kick people of faith out of science, not at all. It's simply about increasing transparency.
And all of this brings us to the final, really provocative question that the source material leaves us with. In a democracy, we value the tolerance of all beliefs. But is science a democracy? Or does it have to, by its very nature, hold ideas to a completely different, much more rigorous standard? A standard where only the arguments that are empirically tested and methodologically sound even get a seat at the table. It's a huge question, and it cuts right to the very heart of what science is and what we need it to be.